It's all well and good talking dynasty strategy, player takes, but if you don't understand where your dynasty roster is at, you're destined to just end up spurning away in mediocrity. I am going to walk you through a dynasty roster review, talk you through the strengths, the weaknesses, how to analyze where your dynasty roster is at, and also make some recommendations of some moves I would make. Stick around as we dive in. This is one of our members' very dynasty rosters. If you want me to be reviewing your dynasty rosters, you can click that join button below and I can get along and dive in and do your rosters. So let's start with the roster. As you can see, at the quarterback position, no real true elite studs, couple of question marks. You've got Tua, potentially could be good. You've got Deshaun Watson. If he can get back to Houston, Deshaun, maybe. Russell Wilson, I think, is nothing more than potentially a QB3 kind of hold the fort type of guy, maybe for parts of this year. And then Will Levis is the great unknown, some great potential, could be a star given the assets they've built around him in that offense, but could also flame out and be a complete bust at the end of this season. At the running back position, again, no real stud. A couple of pieces I like, Tony Pollard, potentially Chuba Hubbard, J.K. Dobbins have got some potential, but feels very light in that running back room. Wide receiver is somewhat of a different story. Two absolute studs at the top, Marvin Harrison, Chris Olave, and then some really nice depth. You got Christian Kirk, Terry McLaurin, Jacoby Myers, Jahan Dotson. That's quite a nice little wide receiver room to build out. And then tight ends is somewhat dreamy, let's be honest. You got Mark Andrews, a true stud at the top. Evan Ingram, he's the top half of the tight end for me. And then Tyler Conklin, I think, is massively underrated. And Tucker Kraft's one of my breakout guys. So really like the wide receiver room, really like the tight end room. QB and running back a little bit room to work, shall we say. Also picks, got all his own picks, and then got an extra 20, 25 second and an extra fourth. So what I do is I think you need to sit down and say, right, where am I strong? Where am I weak? And I use a system called the traffic light system. The idea is that I'm not necessarily saying, have I got a good player? Have I got a bad player? I'm looking at this as, do I have a positional advantage within my squad? And if you're new to the Fantasy Sanctuary, I define my squad as a starter in every spot that I'm starting, plus one backup in each of those spots. So a backup quarterback, backup running back, backup wide receiver, backup tight end, and then a backup flex. So if we can dive across to the traffic light system, here you can see I've got my starters on the left here, the flex spots on the right, and then I've got my three bench spots down the bottom there. The way I define this is that I don't just want to say, oh, I've got a top 12 quarterback, therefore I'm good, because there's 12 teams in your league. If you've got a QB 12, you've got one of the worst starting quarterbacks in the league. So I'm looking for a positional advantage. So if it's a top 4 player at the position, so if it's QB ranked 1 to 4, they get a green. If it's QB ranked 5 to 8, they get an orange. If it's QB ranked 9 to 12, they get a red. We got a video that we'll drop in the link below where I go into this in much more detail. But let's dive into this roster here. As you can see, I mean, it's pretty much what you thought. We've got some really strong wide receiver and tight end positions. Marvin Harrison, he's my wide receiver 5, so he's an orange. Chris Olave is definitely a positional advantage as a wide receiver 2. And then you've got some good depth with Terry McLaurin, Evan Ingram, Jahan Dotson, and obviously Mark Andrews there as well at the tight end position. Where this roster is weak, quarterback, it's got some good depth. Will Levis as your QB3, Russell Wilson as your QB4. That's good depth. But at QB1, you're struggling. 2 as your kind of guy to hang your hat on there. And then, as I mentioned, at running back, just feels like it's lacking a stud. Tony Pollard, if he's your 2, you're all right. But we're not happy about him being your kind of RB1. So that's where my roster's at. That's where you're feeling like, yeah, it's kind of stuck in the middle. It could improve. We could go aggressive this year. It could fall apart. But that's the decisions that we need to make. Before we get into my recommendations, though, we are very, very close to 2,300 subscribers. If you are watching this video and you haven't subscribed, click that little button below. We've got plenty more content coming your way. So, recommendations. This roster needs to decide on a path. Are you going to go aggressive this year and try and win a title this year, or do you wait one more year and try and build out those picks? As I said, you got that extra second round pick and try and target 2025. For me, I don't like any window of non-competing being anything longer than a year. I truly believe even the worst rosters can be turned around to a position where you're looking to win games within a 12-month span. So I would lean more towards being slightly aggressive, seeing if you can round out this roster and try and compete, because once you get into the playoffs, get into that dance, you never know what's coming. I think the two positions that you kind of got to address, you got to get aggressive for RB1. I think if you can add in a stud there, if you can add in a player there that is a cheaper position to acquire, yeah, we'd all love to go out and acquire a QB1, but let's be honest, that's going to cost you an awful lot of money. I think you can add a running back one, and suddenly this roster feels a lot more complete. And then I also think you've got some really good depth at wide receiver and tight ends, but some of it kind of feels wasted. I was talking about the four tight ends. You've got Tyler Conklin, you've got Tucker Kraft. You're probably never going to start them. Can you consolidate some of that depth at wide receiver and tight end into maybe an upgrade over that Christian Kirk in the wide receiver 3 spot? So these are some suggested moves that I would be looking to make. I really like, Kyron Williams as a potential buy. I know there's some hype about Blake Corum at the moment. I still believe Kyron Williams is going to be the lead back in what will be a good offense. Can you move Evan Ingram? Can you move Jahan Dotson and go out and get Kyron Williams? You slot Kyron Williams in as your running back one. You slide Tony Pollard down to your running back two, and suddenly this roster is feeling a lot better. The other option is, could you go out and acquire a win now player like Derrick Henry? His price is low. He's a top 5, top 6 redraft running back. But for Dynasty, he's probably going to be outside the top 18 for most people. I think you could acquire him for a 2024 seconds. Maybe you need to add a sweetener of, a Tyler Conklin or a third or a fourth to that. That, again, makes this roster feel a little bit more win now, a little bit able to compete right now, but you're not having to mortgage the future. And then there's the home run here at running back. Can you go out and buy Christian McCaffrey? Yes, it's probably going to cost you a first and a second. Yes, it is incredibly aggressive, but I think it's a move that you need to be asking. And then my final move, Rashee Rice is so undervalued right now. I'm not worried about the suspension. Look, you've got enough wide receiver depth that with this roster that you can, even if he's suspended 8, 10, 12 games, you can cope that. I think this guy's a stud, and I think he's going to be a fantasy star. So, yeah, can you go out and buy him whilst his price is depleted, whilst people are looking to move off him, and buy low on that kind of potential suspension discount? I know I said I probably wouldn't look at moving for a quarterback one. I think in Superflex, you've kind of got two ways to attack it. Have you got elite studs at the position, or are you going to platoon 4 guys and play matchups and you can kind of get QB1 production out of that? I quite like that with this roster, but I think it's worth going and having a knock on those kind of back end QB1s. Can you go and get one of the 3 guys that I think are undervalued, have got the potential to jump up into the top 6 at the position, but for one reason or another are all undervalued? So I'm packaging together Tua, I'm packaging together Evan Ingram, and I'm packaging together Terry McLaurin, and I'm going to ask the question on Justin Herbert, I'm going to ask the question on Trevor Lawrence, and I'm going to ask the question on Jordan Love. There is a chance you might not have to pay all of that to go and acquire one of those guys, but I just think if you can consolidate some of that depth, maybe trade away a pick or two, this roster could compete. You're not going all in because you've still got those young studs in Marvin Harrison, you've still got Chris Olave, and you've still got really good quarterback positions. Okay, slightly deeper. And I think that this roster is probably not going to sit there as a number 1 and number 2 seed that's pushing for that bye. But this is a young ascending roster that, if a couple of breaks go right once you get into the playoffs, could win a title this year, and could certainly get in, if you're playing for money, in those sort of top 3 spots. So I think you need to decide which way you're going. It is stuck in the middle slightly, but you've got plenty of options you should go, and some interesting moves I think you could be making there. If your roster is stuck in the middle, we've got a video just out all about what you should be doing, how to assess when you're stuck in the middle and what you should be doing. So click on the link, subscribe, and that video will be in your feed very shortly. But if you want your Dynasty roster reviewed on this new bi-weekly series, become a member, hit the join button below, jump in the Discord. I'll be reviewing a roster every other week. And, let me know your thoughts. Is there a move you would be making? Is there a move you disagree with? Jump in those comments below. Of course, we'll be back very soon.